All right. Hello, everybody. It's noon. And so it's time to start the stream. And welcome. Happy Saturday. This is Monica Wahi, data scientist and epidemiologist. And I'm here to present to you today about making resumes and CVs for data science and public health. So I'm a consultant and a mentor in mostly academia, mostly healthcare area because I'm trained in epidemiology. But also just a general data scientist because if you think about healthcare, you can be like, oh, there's like medical devices, but there's also billing. So you have to know about, fintech to some degree. um Medical records is just record keeping, so you learn about just record keeping. And so if you are getting old like I am and you've been in the field for a while, data science just becomes something that you do across different domains, not just healthcare. So that for that reason, I'm often helping retool experienced healthcare providers as data scientists in the same field as they were, only now they're not going to do patient care. Because think about it, people got really burned out with the COVID-19, and I'm not a provider. There's a lot of providers out there who got burned out. And so when providers get burned out on patient care, a lot of times they turn towards research. They say, maybe I can retool myself as a researcher. And that's where data science is really helpful. And that's where I'm really helpful. I can really help people do that. So because of that, I'm always at this intersection of people either trying to get a job the first time in data science, or trying to get a job in academia, or trying to change how they look in data science and academia. And so I'm at this intersection of making these documents. And there are three documents we're going to talk about, document formats. We're going to talk about CV, we're going to talk about resume, and we're going to also talk about BioSketch, because those are important for academia, even though I'm also going to talk about industry. So I'm going to start showing the slides, and then I've got a few examples of those documents that I pulled off the web to show you. And after the stream is over, it's recorded. It's recorded on LinkedIn, and it's also recorded on YouTube. So what I do afterwards is I go through the YouTube description and I put some timestamps in. When I go to do that, I'll put a link to the slides, and then you can download them if you want them. There, I made them so they'll be useful. So hopefully you'll want them. All right. So now I'm going to start by actually sharing the slides here. So let me share the slides. Um, oh, here it is. I don't have it on the beginning here. I had to go to one of those links. Okay, so here's the slide. So I'm going to start with these slides, and I don't have any moderators. I'm low budget, right? You can tell by the slides. Somebody called one of my videos low budget. I was like, that's low budget. I've seen some pretty low budget stuff in data science. But anyway, so I'm pretty low budget. I don't have a moderator. So every once in a while, I'm just going to check the chat to see if anybody's got any questions or anyone showed up. So if you show up and you say, hi, Monica, and I'm going, yap, 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 talking about resumes and CVs, just hold on a second. I'll come over and say hi to you. All right. So let's start. How to make resumes and CVs for data science and public health by me, Monica Wahi, MPH and CPH. I'm certified. All right. So what am I going to talk about in the slide presentation? First, I'm going to give you this big picture concept, and I'm going to talk about the differences between academia, and I include government and academia. I know it's a little stretch, but just because they sort of operate similarly. So, academia, government, and industry in terms of expectations of candidates. And when I say candidates, I mean people who are trying to do a certain role. So you might be in academia and say, I do this kind of research and now I want to do that kind of research. So I'm like, okay, you'll have to prepare your CV or your resume or your bio sketch to make it look like that. So I'm talking about the audience. So if you're in if you're a leader in academia and people are giving you CVs, what is your expectation to have in there? Or if you're an industry like headhunter or something and you're asking for resumes, what is your expectation? Because they're different. Okay. For the same person, like the same person could work at both. Then after just explaining that more, that concept of academia, government versus industry, I'm going to actually define each of those documents because they're sort of defined in vis-a-vis academia and industry. Like if you think of academia as like a culture, and you think of industry as a different culture, that's the way you want to think of it. And these documents, curriculum vitae and biosketch, are aimed at the academic culture, and resume is aimed at the industry culture. But sometimes you need one in academia. So I'm going to sort of explain this complexity. And at the end, I'm going to give you my recommendations. Okay, so first I was going to talk to you more about working in different settings. So you have academia and government as one setting, and industry is another setting. Okay, and I've worked in everything. I remember once when I was like 30 something, I was at some dinner and I was talking to somebody. I don't know. I said, oh, I had a job where I did this. I had a job where I did that. One of my jobs, I did this. And the person I was talking to said, how old are you? 60? And I was like 30 something because I had done so many jobs. So I've worked everywhere. I kind of know how it is. Like I joke with my customers. Sometimes they'll talk to me about what their boss did and they'll say, oh, I used to have your boss, as a joke, because I probably have had a boss like yours. All right. So working in different settings. So in academia and government, when you're working in academia and government and you've got a boss there and you've got a team there, everybody's really concerned with prestige. Like you want your team to be like look prestigious. Okay, look good. Even the lowest level person is classy. Lineages. When I talk about lineages, I mean, oh, I was trained by Dr. Hidura Anderson, or I was trained by Dr. Sellers, or, they have these lineages of people who have trained people who have trained people, especially in labs and stuff. And so they care about your entire past. Like if I come to academia and they're like, what's up with you? I've been having my own business for the last 10 years. But if I start dropping names from like the Alzheimer's Institute where I used to work, or a long time ago when I worked at the cardiovascular division at the University of Minnesota, suddenly I have currency. So, uh, so I gotta drop those names. I gotta use that. It's very political. Academia and government value peer-reviewed publications. Okay, and those are the ones that you submit to a scientific journal, and it gets reviewed by other, people like me. Actually, I review all the time. Like I actually publish all the time in the peer-reviewed literature. If you need help with that, I can hook you up. That's what I'm really good at. Um, because it's valued in academia and government, and a lot of my customers are like, Monica, I gotta publish, and I'm like, I'll hook you up. Also grants. Grants are documents that you prepare in for research. I mean, people get grants for patient care, they'll get grants for art projects or making writing a book. The grants I'm talking about in academia are multi-million dollar grants for like giving COVID vaccinations, or studying giving COVID vaccinations. And in those, you have to look prestigious and you have to write successful grants, get money. That's what they're interested in. It. And so I'm telling you this to be like, if you're like, well, I'm a low level analyst. I'm like, if you look like you'd be good for a good low level analyst for doing grants and publications and stuff, then you'll look good to academia. So this is what it's about. Is like, how do you look good to these people? What do you present to them to look good? So just to tell you, I'm always going on and on about my forever intern, Natasha. Well, Natasha's highly developed career in music doesn't apply to data science very well. So she kind of had to start over with undergraduates and master's degrees in these other scientific fields. And she's like, Monica, how do I get ahead? I'm starting over. And I go, I'll tell you, just do a peer reviewed article with me. In fact, look up our articles, they're good. And because I said, if you want to work in academia, then we'll do that. But if she wants to work in industry, they're no good. So I'll get to that in a moment. So academia and government care less about technical skills. Actually, I'll tell another story about Natasha. She went to a one of these colleges around here, one of these high level colleges, and said, "Hey, I want to work in your lab." and they said, "Do you know Python?" And she said, "No, I know R." And they're like, "Well, we can't hire you unless you know Python." She's like, "Well, what if I learn Python?" I was like, "Okay, sure. Okay, think about that." And if you go to apply for like a drug company or something, and they're like, "We need Python," and you're like, "I don't know Python, I know R," they'll show you the door. Okay. And so that's the difference with academia. They sort of hire more for character and lineage and stuff. So of course she quickly learned Python. Now she knows more than I do. So that's not good if you're the mentor, I guess. But anyway, and so that's sort of like classic academia. And academia also cares about patents. I remember when I worked at the Alzheimer's Institute, we were looking for a CEO. Reason why we picked the person that we picked, not like I picked him, but other people picked him, was because he had these patents. One of them was, even though his expertise was in like genomic knock-ins of mice, Alzheimer's mice, he had a patent in those kind of things, in those genomic mice. But he also had one for like a suitcase handle, and we were all going gaga over that. So I'm like, a suitcase handle. But anyway, he's a really inventive guy. I remember he used to have this car, this old Alfa Romeo he kept fixing, even though he was rich. I don't know, it's kind of cool. But anyway, these people are characters. Okay, so that's academia and government. So this is, so if you, even if you're a low level person, like you're just getting your undergraduate or whatever, or like theoretically Natasha is a low level person because her whole career that she's already had, she's like starting over in science. So she's not unlike somebody who might be a physician or a nurse who's starting over in data science. And if you're trying to do that and trying to look good, the first thing you want to do is publish peer reviewed articles. And the last thing you want to do is learn every single software possible because nobody cares, right? Okay. Now moving on to industry. It's just like flip it over, right? Industry wants efficiency and production. So if you, whatever you present to them, you're like, man, I can do this fast and no muss, no fuss. Just give me anything. I know all the software, and industry is only interested in what you've been doing lately. If you use SQL a few years ago, you don't know SQL. Okay. I mean, I don't know SQL, right? I could learn it. I could do a project in it and then I know SQL again, right? But industry doesn't want me if they want SQL now. Okay. Whereas that's so different than Natasha's experience. Do you know Python? No, but I can learn it. Well, industry is not going to wait for that. Industry does not really care much if you write stuff. And I will qualify that. I said much. If you're in engineering and you write for IEEE or you make some great white papers, if you just happen to have that um, skill, then you could be very popular in the industry because people can't write and they don't write. And so if you make something really nice, that you could turn on industry. But most of the time, they're not looking for that. Like, Natasha's a great example of somebody early in her career where nobody's really going to be looking for publications on her CV or her resume. But if she can put them, peer reviewed ones, and go to academia, she can jump to the head of the line. So that's what I do with my. Like you hire me, you're like a data scientist early in your career, and you're like, help me out here. I'm going straight for that. I'm going to try and get you in the peer reviewed literature. I'll teach you how to do that. But if you aiming for industry, forget it. Forget this peer reviewed literature stuff. What I tend to do with people in industry is figure out how to showcase their stuff online. I'm learning GitHub better. If you guys go to my GitHub, you'll see it looks better. It's got readmes now. But try to showcase like in a blog or in videos to showcase how well you can communicate about your findings. Because they in industry, how you look above everybody as a data scientist is you can communicate, you can talk, you can write, you have documentation, you can create reports, you know, because they want you to do all the technical stuff and sort of give everything back to them when you're done and explain it. And if you can explain it, they love you because a lot of people just can't explain it. And so, and they care a lot about technical skills like specific software, as you can see on the slide. So if you're sitting there and thinking, well, I like writing, so I'm going to do academia, I'm not going to do industry. Or you're sitting there and thinking, oh, I love like machine learning stuff. I just want to do programming. I don't like writing. I want to just do industry. The reality is, most people, although some people just kind of stay in one place, most data scientists are curious and public health people. We're just curious. We're more generalists, and we tend to move around from sector to sector. So, kind of get it in your mind that you might just work anywhere. Like I have my own business now, so I'm technically in industry, and if I hire anybody, they're in industry. So industry isn't like even uniform. So just think about those things. Okay, I'm gonna go back and see if anybody's got any questions. Nope. All right. I'll go back to. All right, so we'll go back to lecture. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the different documents. The first one is, what is a curriculum vitae? Okay, and I put a screenshot on, excuse me, the slide of one that I found online that I'm going to go over if we have time. I'm just going to pull it up and show you. And this is Dr. Brown, Dr. Kiana Brown at Rutgers University, and she's, I think, a professor of social work. Oh, it says her PhD is in epidemiology, so it's pretty appropriate. So, what is a curriculum vitae? It's a long document that you add to throughout your career, but you never subtract from. So, if when we go through Dr. Brown's CV later, you'll see it's pretty long. She's a professor. Um, each time she does a publication, she'll add to it. Each time she teaches another course, she'll add to it. Each time, let's say she writes a book, she'll add to it. She'll keep her current data updated. Like you can see her address there, at Rutgers. It's the Rutgers address and her office phone number and stuff. If she changes offices or she gets a job at Harvard or something, she's going to change that information at the top and keep that updated. But that's not the hard part. The hard part is remembering to add stuff as soon as it happens. And as soon as you do new things, presentations, whatever, just add to it. So it gets pretty long, and there are certain sections everyone expects to see, especially at the beginning. Like you see Dr. Brown's, there's education, and then you can see research interests at the bottom of the slide. Excuse me. When we open it up, I'll show you. Usually, you have your kind of like a resume. You have your education and your positions at the front, but and there's certain things you sort of try to put at the front. Like I just told you, I'm a reviewer for a lot of public peer reviewed publications. I put that at the front because that's meaningful for my career because I'm a writer. I write a lot. If you're like a clinician and you don't really write a lot, sometimes that stuff, those publications are further back, and you put other things like your residency, your fellowships and stuff at the front. So the format of a CV is sort of customized, like it's not unlike the new LinkedIn profile where you can add the sections you want and fill them in depending on what kind of a person you are, like what you've done in life. That's the way the CV is you just kind of start adding sections as you start doing things. Like I started publishing books, so I had to add that. I put courses on LinkedIn Learning, so I had to add a section for that. So my CV is over 20 pages. Um, when I was a research secretary in the 90s, I would help people maintain their CV that I was working for, and I remember one guy was over 100 pages. So, so yeah, so these things. The important thing about a CV is if you're keeping one, always update it as soon as a new thing happens, like a new publication or a new presentation, whatever. Just do it right away. And secondly, never erase anything from it. Just keep it as a long compendium of everything you've ever done. Excuse me. Now, the big question, should everyone keep a CV? And you'll see I have two columns on the slide, academia and industry. So I'm going to talk about academia first. The answer is yes. I don't care who you are. You could be a research secretary like I was. Keep a CV. Just keep it. Maybe nobody will see it, or maybe nobody will see it for a few years, but you'll need it. Um, Always make sure it's updated. Always have the most current data. Never remove anything. When I was a research secretary, this is kind of like my origin story, I guess. In 1997, I was between my undergraduate and my master's. I didn't know what I wanted to do in life. I was a fashion designer. I got kind of sick of that. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was being this research secretary in epidemiology unit. And a biostatistician came to me and told me he had been assigned to write something. And I didn't know biostatisticians generally couldn't write. And I was like, oh, well, why did you write it? And he's like, because I can't write. And I just couldn't even imagine that. So he showed me the statistics and I wrote it. And then he made me an author. And then I don't know, it caused a lot of political problems. I didn't even really understand what was going on at the time. So I'm really grateful to this biostatistician. And he told me that I should be a biostatistician. So now I am one. But in any case, that just shows that you can be a research secretary, or like Natasha, you could be an undergraduate when she was an undergraduate, and you could have a publication. So where are you going to put it, right? So start your CV. And the example, I'll give you that link of how I found Dr. Brown's. Dr. Brown's is a great one to look at, to just think about what sections you want. And you can find other people's CVs online too. I don't usually post mine honestly, because it changes a lot. I publish just constantly. I'm constantly updating it. Um yeah, so the CV is really, if you're in academia right now, you should have a CV, you should make one, and you should update it even if you don't think there's anything that needs to be on it, just do it. If you're not in academia right now, you're just don't have a job at all, or in a relevant job, like you're working retail or something, and or you're in industry, I still believe in the CV, because you want to remember everything about yourself, and you may get a job in academia in the future. The only time I guess I would not keep a CV, I say this, I wouldn't keep a CV if I was never going to work in academia, but you never know. And especially engineers, I've met so many engineers who are like, I'll never work in academia. But sure enough, somebody offers them a job because they eventually are brilliant. They've done a lot of work, and they've got patents and they've got white papers, and maybe they just have a handful. But with my business, what am I doing? I'm putting that CV together for them. And so, as you can imagine, one of the things I do is a lot of cleanup when people haven't kept track of things with their CV. In fact, I remember a literature professor who I was just close to because I just loved her. I mean, I'm not in literature, but she's like, Monica, help me. I've let my CV get away from me. And she's a literature professor. She had published so much stuff. It took me hours, but it was gorgeous when it was done. All right, now I'm going to move on from CV, which is a long, huge document of everything you've done in your life, to resume. So what is a resume? So the people who are listening who are data scientists, you'll understand what I'm saying. It's a current extract from a CV. And what I mean by that is where you look at the CV as kind of like your data, your foundational data, and you pick and choose from the CV what you want to put on the resume to showcase. So it is. It's like taking a report. It's like a report from your CV. Um, and so how do you know what to choose? Well, what I tell people is, before I can know what to put on your resume. So, of course, all my customers have to keep a CV, or I'll punch them in the face, right? I'll make them. If somebody wants me to make a resume for them, if they're not like, this is their first job or something, I usually make sure they have a CV in the background, because I want to make sure I get everything right on the resume. Whatever I choose, I put the right thing. And so then I look at the CV like a universe of data, and I look at what their function is. Like, sometimes you need a resume, obviously, to apply for jobs, but sometimes you need it for like to apply for fellowships or grants or different things, scholarships. And I try to then think of the audience who's going to read this resume, and that's how I choose. And that's what the audience is expecting. They're expecting that you picked out the most relevant things. So I say most on topic. If somebody comes to you and says, we're applying for a contract, we need SQL programmers, then I would say, okay, let's put your most recent SQL projects on there. Or if they say, uh, help me apply for the scholarship to do advanced math, and I'd put math stuff on there. You know what I mean? So, and also when it comes to publications, if you have any, if you're a public health person, the same thing goes. What are your recent research projects? And if you have publications, you would just pick out the most recent or on topic publications. So my resumes, when somebody asks me for a resume, you'll either see publications about like informatics methods or data science methods, or you'll see ones about actual public health, like topics like cancer or something. And so a resume should be 1 to 2 pages, should be easy to read quickly. actually found it was a little easier to find a good example resume because I found the site with this example resume on it that talked about it. It's actually just kind of a good site. And it's funny, there's a lot of sites out there, websites that are trying to give you advice for data science resumes. And I'll just tell you, I don't think they're good advice. I just don't think they're good advice. I don't know where they're getting what they're saying. So I'm going to give you my advice. You can take from it what you will. All right. So let me just see if anybody's got any questions here. Nope. All right. Let me go back here. All right. So how are resumes different in academia versus industry? Okay. So um in academia, like I was saying, let's say you have to go to apply for a fellowship or something, they might ask for a resume. Or you apply for a job, they might ask for a resume. But normally they don't. Normally in academia, like if you're applying for a grant, even a grant from a nonprofit, like not the government, or you have to sort of sum up your CV, you use what's called a bio sketch. Now, I'm going to show you what a bio sketch is. It's a template that was developed by our government, the National Institutes of Health in the US. And so if you haven't heard of it, maybe it's because of that. So the bio sketch is like a resume in that but it's an official format. You know how the resumes can be kind of different? The bio sketch can't. It's this official format from NIH, and it just has the most recent academic activity, like publications and teaching. Whereas on a resume, you might not put that you're teaching. It depends on what you're trying to apply for, but the bio sketch has room for like these to summarize your academic activity. And so if I'm asked to make a resume, I usually have a bio sketch sitting around. I try to give the bio sketch to the person, but it usually doesn't work. Like I have a friend who's a business person. She's not academic and she's involved in fintech. And sometimes her organization will submit a bid, like we're bidding on work from like the state of Massachusetts or something, or Commonwealth of Massachusetts, right? And she'll say, Monica, I need your resume for this work. We're going to apply to revise this database. I need your resume. I'll give her my bio sketch and she'll say, okay, this is not acceptable. And then she'll tell me what she wants to see on my resume. Like put stuff recently where you've been doing cost analysis or where you've been doing risk assessments or whatever. And so then she coaches me. And this is what will happen to you if you get a headhunter or anybody who's helping you apply for these jobs is they'll coach you on which things to pick from your CV or your list of projects to actually put on your resume. So if you're making a resume, you're probably applying to something in industry. If you're making a bio sketch, you're doing something in academia. So how do our resumes different in academia versus industry? Well, in academia, they almost don't exist because they prefer this bio sketch thing. And in industry, then bio sketches, they don't know what a bio sketch is. Like my friends are like, what is this ugly thing? And so in industry, a resume is typically prepared when job searching or contract searching, like I was describing with my friend. And it's almost, I've seen people who almost make a different one for each. Like I definitely make a new one for each contract we apply for. Um, People will make a different one for each job they apply for sometimes especially if you've done a lot like when she will make she doesn't apply for jobs because she's runs the business, but when she'll change her resume each time, uh to each time we do a different bid to customize it. Like we always customize our resume for each bid. And I think that if you apply for a job, it just depends. If you What I normally do with my customers is I'll prepare a resume for a particular job application and a letter and everything. Then I'll look at the next job announcement they give me and I'll see how much maybe I want to change what I just created or not. So I sort of just keep this daisy chain of it. So and so these industry resumes are typically prepared when job searching and they're updated with the most recent technical activities. So usually software usage and projects. These places have an interest in patents, but they don't really care about academic items like publications, teaching, whatever. And that's why the BioSketch is nice because there's so many different things you're doing in academia, and the BioSketch has a little compartment for each of them. Whereas the resume is more like a little loosey goosey. If you've been doing a lot of projects or you want to talk a lot about your software, you can kind of move the real estate around for that. One thing to worry about is when it comes to patents, academia and industry do view them a little differently. In academia, they like it if you have patents because it's prestige. Also, universities like to own a patent. They sort of feel like they own a patent if you're there because there's this law called the Bayh-Dole Act in the US, which makes it very hard for you to work at a university or college and claim a patent that isn't involved with them. So if they hire you, they think they've got access to your patents. They don't want to steal them. They want to, maybe get, if you choose to distribute them, they want to get some money, right? So it can make you attractive to them to have patents. But on the industry side, if you have patents, it starts to be kind of this issue where they're worried. Um, if you start working for industry and then you invent something while you're in industry, industry owns it. Okay, that place owns it. So they get worried then if you're starting to work there and somebody else already owns some of your patents, right? Because then maybe you'll talk to them. So you got if you have patents, it's a good thing. But honestly, I'll just tell you after that experience, the suitcase handle guy, patents are only really useful if you plan on doing something with them. If you plan on getting somebody to manufacture and distribute it, then it's worth it. Just getting patents to look good or whatever, they're just expensive to defend, and they become, as I'm describing, a political football when you're trying to get a job in like you think, oh, I have a lot of patents that'll make me attractive. Well, it's a mixed bag because the university would love to have it, industry would love to have it, but do they come with a bunch of legal issues? Do they come, So it's better to just, I mean, you have to tell them if you have them, but it's better to just decide before you're making a patent. Do I really want this patent? Do I really want to sell this thing? And if that's the case, or you're just going to run your own business for the rest of your life and these are your patents, then yeah, go ahead. All right. So finally, I get to this bio sketch, which I have been harping on. So if you can see just a snapshot on the slide, it's like ugly, right? You'll see it's very formulaic. There's this table you fill out. It's like an Arial font. And this was invented by the National Institutes of Health. And it's kind of like an academic resume, as I said. It's 1 to 2 pages. And 90% of it is just the most recent activity. Like the at the top, your name and whatever, that's whatever position you have right now. And then there's places to put the important stuff. And this is updated and submitted with grant applications, but in academia, they'll ask you for it. Like, let's say you're applying for a stipend or something like that. They might just say, "Well, send us your bio sketch," because they sort of think you have one lying around from the last time you submitted a grant. So biosketches are only asked for in academic projects. So if somebody asks you for one, you are probably in a job where you should be maintaining a CV in the background. So that's just a trick here. And I only make a biosketch when I'm asked to do it, and then I update the last one I made. So I just, whenever we're submitting a grant, I make a new biosketch just for that grant. So therefore, if people ask me, an academic, for a resume, I just update my most recent bio sketch and give it to them. But they usually reject it, as you can see on the slide. They prefer a resume that looks more like the industry standard. All right. So let me see if anybody's got any questions before I go on with my recommendations. No. All right. So here are my recommendations. So here are my recommendations about CVs. I've said this before, but I'm going to repeat it. Update immediately after something happens. After you teach a class, after you get an award, after do anything that's on your CV, add it. Or if you get an award for the first time, put it create an award section and put it on there. Okay, so that's my first suggestion. My second suggestion is to hard code the updated date in the footer. And by that I mean open up the footer in Microsoft Word and put updated and type in the date. Don't use some automated field or anything, because you want to keep track of when you updated it. It like Like I'm telling you, that's really important. You can always save new ones, but new copies, just make sure you put in the footer what date you updated. Then thirdly, move sections around and add them as your career grows. So in the beginning, like remember how I told you the story of how I had a publication suddenly, and I'm a research secretary. So that was the first thing on my CV was that was the thing that taught me, oh crap, I got to make a CV because I was maintaining people's CVs and I was like, where am I going to put this publication? Not forget about it. I'm like, time to start my CV. So the CV, if you ever get my CV today, that's when it started. That's when that Word document was created originally. Um, in the 90s, was it 1997, I think? Kind of crazy, huh? They've had Microsoft Word that long, even longer, I think. But anyway, publications was one of my first sections. Later, I started teaching courses. Like later, got a master's degree. I started doing things. I sort of can relate to Natasha right now, my forever intern, because she's getting a master's degree. She's doing projects. Um, she's going to conferences. And so pretty soon she's going to have to add all of those sections and move them around. And in the beginning, going to conferences is a big deal because she's new to science. As she publishes and makes books and just the amazing things she does, those things want to be as important. She can move them to the back. I always keep my CV neat and ready to send. If you actually update it every time something happens, then it's already ready to send, you know, and you want to have it ready in case opportunity knocks, really. Okay, so that's my recommendations for CVs. For resumes, here's my recommendations. So this is greatly influenced by when I was looking up other people's recommendations for resumes, especially data science ones. Don't do anything fancy with formatting. Don't put little images on it. Don't put like a column on the side, and don't make it look like a web page. Make it look kind of boring, like this example that I have here. Not this one. This one. Like it's kind of pretty. There's some color, but not. It's pretty normal looking. Okay. Use TrueType font, which is a set of fonts that's on pretty much every computer. So like Arial or Times New Roman. Try to use just some font that everybody has that's normal. And again, this is for data science and public health um, resumes. I'm not talking about graphic design. I'm not talking about like theater. I'm not talking about these other fields. I'm talking about these fields, these fields that gave you bio sketch format. All right. Um, my third recommendation for resumes in data science and public health is make it upload friendly and SEO friendly. And by that, I mean like kind of like this one here. You know, those of you who are familiar with XML, you can kind of imagine how XML would parse this stuff. There's headers, those could be read. These words here are meaningful, like they can fit in a search engine. That's kind of what you're doing. Like, and I can still read this as a regular person. I can just read it, and it's pretty neat. That's what you're going for is really neatness. Um, Make it easy for someone looking for a particular skill set. I use SQL. I guess I got SQL in the brain of skills to find them. So if I'm like I teach SAS a lot. And SAS isn't just SAS. Like you can know micro language in SAS, you can know SAS via, you can know reporting stuff in SAS. So how if you know SAS, try to make it clear what you know about SAS. Just make it easy for if somebody's trying to hire a SAS programmer that they can easily see what you can do. And I actually kind of make fun of my fintech friend because when she gives me stuff that she's written, like her resumes, I'll be like, I don't even know what this says. And it'll be filled with technical jargon about the stuff she did. And she does project management and all that. I'm like, what even happened? And she'll be like, oh, we fixed a payroll portal so that it now updates payroll automatically or something like that, and I won't be able to figure that out from what I read. So I try to make it like human readable. Like we updated a payroll system that was miscalculating reports. We used Crystal Reports, that's the oldest thing in the world, to do this, that, and the other thing. You know what I mean? It's like you kind of curate or narrate how you did the project. So somebody like me can be like, okay, oh, they use SAS Via for blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, they should be able to do my project. That's sort of how you want to think about how you write about your projects on your resume. And even if you're in public health, say, something like we did a smoking cessation campaign with, you know, young adults and I don't know, Cincinnati. You know what I mean? Like try to make it like I remember reading once a public health. Oh, this was it. It was this fintech friend. We were applying to do a public health evaluation, program evaluation, and the way they described the program is they said it was a Narcan program, for reversal of opioid, and the program had something to do with the fire department. But I couldn't tell, was the fire department trained to give Narcan, or were they trained to teach the community about Narcan, or with the fire department, or were they having opioid abuse and they needed the Narcan? Like I just could not even tell. And so you want to make sure that it's really obvious to somebody who's not even in the field, like kind of what you did, even if they don't understand the software or exact jargon, that they kind of get the big picture what you were doing. Now, when I made that last slide, what I realized is it's easy for me to say all this because I am an expert at Microsoft Word. My CV, like part of, remember when I told you that literature professor? Okay, she's not an expert at Microsoft Word. And a lot of what I did for her was just using word styles and functions in Microsoft Word to help do consistent formatting. You know how I was talking about the footers and stuff? It's really hard. So I decided to make this special offer for you if you're here on the chat, or if you're watching this later. Um, is that I'll do a resume update for you for $50 or a CV update for you for $100. Okay. So, and it's an update. I can't just start it. You have to send me whatever it looks like now. So here's a process: send me by email or LinkedIn, which I'll make sure it's in the description on YouTube, and or if you're seeing this on LinkedIn, you know how to get a hold of me. Your current Word version of your resume or your CV, and tell me what it is, because sometimes I can't tell. Early in careers, sometimes it's not really clear whether it's a CV or a resume. But send it to me, and let me know that you watch this and this is what you're doing. And so you send me the document, and then in the message, tell me what information you want added. And if you have like if you have like a certificate from attending a conference and you're like, I want this information, you can just attach it. Just give me all the information you need added and give me the original document. Then what I'll do is I'll send you a PayPal invoice to your email address for the amount, and then you can pay it. Then I will use Microsoft Word and reformat the whole thing. I'll make it gorgeous for you, and do what I do. And even if your CV is kind of long, let's see if I could do it. Um, and I'll return you a new Word document that's all nice and formatted, that has your new information in. And if I have any questions, I'll just email you, or maybe we can meet by Skype or Zoom, and I can see your face and you can tell me uh the answer to some of these things. But in any case, if it's straightforward, you can just send it to me and I'll pay the fee. I'll send you the invoice and I'll send it back to you, and then you can feel rest easy that it looks good, and that I've done Microsoft Word things to make it hopefully easier to update, than more standardized and SEO friendly and upload friendly. All right. Okay. And then this slide presentation, when I make it available to you, these links are going to be in it. And then right now I'm going to move from the slide presentation to actually pulling up examples of these. Um, but let me go over and see if there's any questions. Nope, I don't see any questions. Okay, so let's see here. So I'm going to stop sharing. Then let me see. So first, let's look at CVs. So I'm going to share. Uh, okay, here's the CV of Dr. Brown. I love this CV. I think she did a beautiful job on it. You'll see that it's in uh PDF, but I'm sure she had it as in Word. And I say she, she probably has an executive secretary or something that does this. So, okay, so first let's look. First, I want to show you this is 15 pages. So this person, see, they got their PhD in 2014, and it's like about 8 years later. So that's why it's so big, is because she's been doing stuff. Okay, so this was her education. She went to the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. This was her dissertation. So a lot of times, sometimes people will put it this way: usually your education comes first, like this. I guess I've seen this. She got a grant. Like, this is amazing. It's really cool if you get a dissertation grant. So that's why she put that on here. Most people would do it. She seems like a superstar. I don't know her. I just pulled this off the internet. And then so she put her research interests at the front. Like, she's kind of like me. She's a hardcore researcher. If she was like, I see as master's in social work, if she was a therapist, she might not put that there. So it's sort of different. Here's fellowships she did. She did research fellowships. She was clinician. She might have done residencies or something that would go here. Licensure and certifications, that goes here. I see, I said CPH. My CPH goes there. She doesn't have one. Ha ha ha. Then professional experience. So this is like her positions, and you'll see that she has multiple positions all at once. That's not normal in industry, but that's normal in academia. See what her positions are? Like assistant professor in here, assistant professor in there, because she's a rock star, as you can tell. Like, she's got all this stuff going on with her research. And if I was in academia, this is probably what I'd be doing, but I just don't like having jobs like Dr. Brown, so she could do it. And she's doing administrative work. Like, people like Dr. Brown are typical customers of mine, because what I'll do is I'll help them with all this stuff, with making a CV, with writing these papers, things like that. Oh, and she was also in the military, so she's a part of her amazingness. This professional activities, almost everybody has this. So up to now, hers looks very typical, and even this is typical. She's a member of some societies. She's a member of some committees at where she works at Rutgers. I am a member of societies, but I also review a lot for peer reviewed journals. So that's what's under my professional activities. Okay. She she has this separate. I don't have editorial activities in mine. Why does she have it? Because apparently she does a lot. And apparently, like, yeah, she's the editor of like journals. Like, she's really a writer. Here's her honors and awards. Now, her honors and awards are a little further back. Often I'll see honors and awards up here even before, usually like right after professional experience, like near the licensure. But she's a rock star, she doesn't need it. And she's also, it looks like these awards are also the grants she's gotten. I have a list of grants, but mine's at the end because I don't do that mainly. And then here's her teaching, mentoring. And so now what we've got is a whole bunch of different sections where mine would look different. Like, she's got media coverage. See, I told you she's a rock star. Um, and so she's got that section. I don't really have media coverage. I could only wish. So I'll give you a link, as you could see in that slide presentation, to this, and you can take a look at it. So this is a CV, okay, in academia. But I wanted to show you something I found, and that is this CV. Now, she's got an MPH. She doesn't have a PhD, and so she's like me. And she's a senior epidemiologist, and she's in industry. See this? So I feel more of a kinship with Mina. I don't call her Dr. Sue. I'll just call her Mina, Ms. Sue, because I'm Ms. Wahi. I don't have a PhD, and and I'm working in industry. So notice how notice how different it is. She's published over 40 papers, blah, blah, blah. Who cares what the papers are? This is industry. See that? That's the difference. And see, she's Boston U. I live near Boston University. I think that's a really good place to go. That's where I told Natasha to go. So she's going. Um, And then see, she's got professional activities and honors, professional associations, selected professional experience. So hers is kind of like a melding of a CV and a resume. Notice how it's kind of pretty at the top, but it's really plain. It's really plain. So so this idea that industry wants something fancy, no, they just want what they want, right? And so this is a good example of that. So that was a CV from industry, and before is a CV from academia. Now what I'm going to do is show you, let me see, stop sharing. I'm going to show you the resume. Let's see here, which is that just at that link. Let me see here. Where am I? Window, Chrome tab. Here it is. Okay, so this is the link that I gave you, and there's a lot of stuff on here, but this is it, right? So this is Amy's two-page resume. And so you'll see I actually preferred it the second page first. See this technical, she makes a list of this, her education's down here. But what most is about is these are jobs she's done, and these are projects, or no, I guess these are some, it depends on what your job is. If your job is a consultant and you do different projects, usually you put these different projects. So let's say she worked at the teaching company and she did multiple projects while at the teaching company. Then she'll put those separately. Let's hear. This is, see, it looks like here she's putting a bunch of projects now. And this is not unusual because back she was just doing market research, whereas now she's a data scientist. Three's improved, you know. Um, and so this is, and then the summary up here, you don't have to put that, but that can kind of help if you're applying for a certain thing because it just explains, yeah, I'm perfect for this, you know. Um, this is a little jargony, but I would even explain it plainer. Like the more plain you can communicate, the better, because managers don't always know all these things, these details. And so, like here, acted as gatekeeper in charge of monitoring weekly sales reports and quality of internal product teams. So let's say she's using a software to do that. She can mention the software in there, but making sure that I understand that's what she was doing. That's the important thing when you're talking to managers who you're kind of doing with the resume. All right. So, and then I'll give you a link to that. So then finally, the last thing I was going to show you is this bio sketch. And oh, I have it open. So I'm going to go share it. Okay, here it is. I got move over here. Oh, is it being shared now? Let's see. Here it is. Okay, so here I'll turn this on. So the link in the slides is to an NIH website that has sample bio sketches on it, and this is one of them. So this is just a sample I got from the internet that was meant to be a sample. And so you'll see that this is for Morgan Casey Hunt is the person that's just filled in, and they filled in this, and they filled in associate professor of psychology. Now, what if Dr. Kiana Brown was applying for this, right? She only has a million uh, titles. So what I do is I put her main title when I'm doing a bio sketch. So that's another service I do is I'll make a bio sketch from a CV. You know, if you're doing a grant, or and I submit grants, I put grants together. I used to be the head of the grants department when I was at the Alzheimer's Institute for a little while, and then I moved over to IT, and somebody else, like, I kind of established the grants department and I had somebody else do it because I didn't really want to do that. I want to do IT, but I can do all of it. So if you need help with IT grants, whatever, just give me a call. But anyway, so what I would do is I would take the CV and I look at what grant we're writing, and I would put on here, like, this is the institution location, that pretty much stays the same. But I put on there the right thing. Like, I remember a guy at University of South Florida where he worked at the VA. He was a clinician at the VA, the Veterans Administration at USF, and he also had an appointment in psychology at USF, because he was a therapist. It depended on where we were applying or stuff, which one I would put as his position title to try and make him look good. So this personal statement sort of summarizes what your work is. It's kind of like that little blurb at the top I just showed you on Amy's resume, that data science resume. And then down here, like all this R01 stuff, this is a list of grants that they've gotten. Remember how the grants are so important in academia? Here's their recent, just the publications they want to show, and then these are the positions and scientific appointments. And now they have this contributions to science. The BioSketch format has evolved over the years. Like, remember I was talking about 1997? Since 1997, this has changed like hugely, like this template. So that's why you want to go to the link and download it before you make one. Um, okay, so I just described all of those different. Oh, will it be saved in your YouTube channel? Hi there. I'm so glad you showed up. Yes, it will. In fact, it is. But if you wait a little bit, what I do is, I see you're just coming at the end. I write a description and I put timestamps and I put links. I'll put links to the slide. So check back and then you can go through the whole thing and see the whole thing. And it's also on LinkedIn, but YouTube it's better because I do that description. All right. Well, since you're here, do you have any specific questions? It's okay if you missed it. If you have any questions, I'm almost ready to end the stream, so go ahead and ask them. And if anybody else is out there, like, I don't, as much as I like the software, this Restream software I'm using, I can't tell if anybody is watching. Like, it says 0, but obviously, somebody's watching. Um, so I just don't know if you're out there. But if you are, feel free to ask a question. Or if you're watching this later and watching the recording and you have a question, you can put a comment on the recording. I go back and try to maintain these live streams, because what I'm trying to do with the live stream, if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see I have all these little short videos with little advice, whatever. But what I'm trying to do with live stream is, in the best case scenario, people show up and ask actual questions so I can interact with you. But in the worst case scenario, I have some more long form content where I can really get into details to sort of go deeper into the stuff I just put short stuff about. And so, yeah, I like to check back and see what people are interested in, and what they're not interested in. Uh, Often I am presenting about different software or how to do things. But I found that a lot of people like different software and how to do things kind of relates to what job you have. And so I've been starting to give more of my career advice, because I was realizing, I give career advice to my customers like literally constantly. Why don't I just give them to everybody? Of course, if you want customized advice, you got to be my customer. But I have a lot of good generic advice out there for everybody, like what I put in this lecture, because this is stuff my customers are constantly asking me. What's a CV? What's a resume? What do I put in it? How do I know the difference? How do I know what to put? And I just feel like, when I was preparing for this, I didn't find any information that answered that question on the internet. Like, I didn't find anything like what I was telling you on here. I found a lot of kind of like BS that some of, like, you find the stuff about your CV and it says, well, you should put your classes and you should put your, but it doesn't really tell you like what your audience is. What are they looking for in that CV? What is people expecting to be reading, and what do you do if you need like a shorter version of your CV? Like, what happens? A lot of my customers, I'll watch them remove stuff from their TV. I'm like, no, stop. You're not supposed to do that. So I'm trying to do some like general education about these documents, which I just happen to know so much about because I was a secretary and it was my job to like maintain them. So it's kind of funny, these documents are so important to me, but most academics, they don't even really have much to do with them. They hardly update them, they hardly care. But I think they're your currency, and especially if you're like me and you publish a lot, definitely want to showcase that. Or if you're like you do a lot of projects, you definitely don't want to forget about any of those projects. All right. Well, we've come to the end of the stream. Thank you to those of you who showed up. I'm sorry I only saw one question. If you asked questions and I didn't see them, I'm really sorry. I'll maybe find them later when I'm going through this. Everybody else likes this software. I don't know why I'm not seeing everybody on it, but I apologize and we'll just have to work through it. So it's Saturday and the weather's beautiful here in Boston. I think it's beautiful. Last I looked, it changes all the time. So let's hope we all get out there and get some good, healthy exercise on the weekend for public health, right? Like we're all, yay, public health, right? Okay, well, thank you so much. If you're watching this recording, thank you for watching. And if you're showing up live, thank you for showing up. And keep you know, like it if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel if you want more live streams. I'm going to try and do one every Saturday. All right, signing off. Have a good weekend.